So this section is about the behavioral perspective of motivation. Believe it or not, you already know the basics of this because it's based entirely on operant conditioning. So the behavioral perspective is the idea that providing reinforcers is what is motivating, and we're also motivated by trying to avoid punishments. And you all know that that makes a lot of sense. But as I alluded to when we covered operant conditioning, we don't want to overuse operant conditioning. So when do we want to use it? Well, sometimes with very difficult students. So those are students who you have tried to motivate in all kinds of other ways and nothing is working. So you might provide them with tokens or with play money, that sort of thing, if that motivates them. Um, Rewards are acceptable for easy tasks, and I'll show you why in just a bit, but rewards tend to enhance performance for things that we are already pretty good at. And rewards are also acceptable for new behavior when you're trying to get your students to do something that they've never done before. So you can use rewards until that new behavior is learned, and then it's an old behavior, so you don't want to use the rewards anymore. These are things down here when you don't want to use rewards. So challenging tasks, we don't want to use rewards, and I'll show you why in just a minute. But essentially, with challenging tasks, when we have rewards hanging over our heads, that tends to actually make us do worse. Tasks involving creativity, the same sort of thing. With rewards, as an attempt to motivate us, we tend to be less creative. And then with tasks that are already enjoyable, getting rewards for doing those things, that actually makes us think that we did not enjoy the tasks. So rewards backfire in these cases. Again, since this is a psych class, what I tell you is based on research. So let's go through a little bit of research. This is a study, it's an older study from 1973, but it has been replicated in different ways and its findings seem to hold up pretty well. So what these researchers did, they got young kids, preschool kids, um, and they asked them individually to draw a picture for them with magic markers. So I just refer to this as the magic marker study. Um, the kids were randomly assigned to conditions. So for some of the kids, the researchers would go up to them and say, hey, if you draw a picture for us, then you will get an award. Then they were shown something, there wasn't an example of the award in the article, but I'm assuming it looked something like this, the way that they described it. So it had the kid's name, it was called a Good Player Award, it had the name of their school, and this was going to be posted for everybody to see, like on a bulletin board. So most of the kids were excited about that. That's motivating for a lot of kids that age. Another group of kids, they weren't told anything about an award, so that's considered the no award group. They were still asked to draw a picture though. The other group, they were asked to draw a picture. They weren't told anything about the award initially, but after they drew the picture, they actually got an award that looked like this. So the researchers decided they couldn't really ask kids that age how much they enjoyed doing the drawing. So they came up with a pretty innovative way to assess how much they had enjoyed coloring with markers. What they did was they gave all the kids free time and they assessed which kids played with magic markers and when they played, for how long they played with magic markers. So if expecting an award actually had negative effects, these kids wouldn't have played with magic markers as much. So here are those data. The group who expected an award spent much less of their free time. This is a smaller percentage of their free time playing with magic markers later on. The other two groups, so the group that didn't get an award at all, and the group who didn't know they would get an award, but they did, so they got a surprise award, those two groups spent quite a lot more of their free time playing with magic markers. So we can interpret that as, well, they actually enjoyed playing with magic markers. Whereas the group who was shown the award initially, they were just doing it to get the award. They didn't actually enjoy it. Those results are verified by creativity scores. So the drawings were assessed for creativity by people who did not know which condition the kiddos were in. And same sort of thing happened. The kids who expected an award were deemed less creative in their drawings than kids in the other two conditions. So again, that just verifies these kids were drawing to get the award, whereas the other two groups of kids were drawing because they were enjoying it. So decline in quality, that just is referring to the creativity scores. So one of the conclusions that can be drawn from this is that if you reward people for doing something that they already enjoy doing, they start to think, well, I must have done that to get the reward instead of because I enjoyed it. This is one of the reasons that grades can kind of reduce intrinsic motivation. They can make us think, well, I must have been studying so I could get an A. That must mean that I don't actually enjoy the topic. Praise is a special form of reward. It can be successful with certain students. It can backfire with other students because they don't always like being praised, especially in front of other people. Praise seems to be most effective with students from lower socioeconomic status backgrounds. And that is basically because they're a little less likely to receive praise at home. There are certainly some families who praise their students and have lower incomes, but in general, they're less likely to receive that at home for a variety of reasons. Praise also seems to be effective with students who have a lot of anxiety, so that can work pretty effectively for them. And then for younger students, for older students, praising them in front of their peers can often be a bad thing that can embarrass them. So you want to take those students aside or write their praise down on a paper that they've turned in instead of praising them in front of groups. That can be the case for younger students, so take it on a person by person basis. Some students might be embarrassed by praising them in front of the group. Here's another thing, and I'm giving you an article this week to read that will give you some more information on this idea. But when you do praise students, you don't want to praise their ability. In other words, you don't want to say, oh, you're so good at math or you're so smart. Because what that can do is when they actually get a challenging task, when you give them a really hard math problem and they struggle a little bit, they're going to attribute that struggling to the fact that, oh, I must not be smart because I can't do this. So instead, you want to praise their effort instead of ability. So, oh, you did really well on this math test. You must have worked really hard. You're trying really hard. That way, when they face challenging tasks, studies show us that they work harder. If they're struggling a little bit, they think, well, I must not be working hard enough, so I'm going to keep working. Now again, that can kind of backfire if you give them problems that they aren't actually capable of doing, so you have to be a little bit careful with this. But again, that article I'll give you this week will give you a lot more examples of this.